"Y'all ain't getting through here ever again." That's what one of the HOA board members yelled, laughing as they padlocked the newly built steel fence that now blocked my entire ranch entrance. The sign they nailed to it? "Private property, HOA members only." And right behind them, a group of smug-looking neighbors were clapping like they'd just won a trophy. I stood there, stunned. My boots crunched over the gravel as I walked up to the fence. My pickup was idling behind me, my dog Scout still in the back seat tilting his head in confusion. This wasn't some simple fence. It was a 12-foot-tall steel monster with chain links and barbed wire on top. They had dug up part of the county road just to put in cement footers. It looked like a prison gate. I took one slow breath and watched as the HOA president, a sharp-jawed woman named Linda Morrison, stepped out from behind the crowd. "Well, well," she said with a smirk. "Looks like the rancher finally realizes he's not above community standards. If you want access, you'll need to register your property with the HOA like everyone else." I didn't say a word. Did she not know who I was? She laughed again. "What, cat got your tongue? Or are you just now realizing your old cowboy charm doesn't work here?" I stared at her. No one, not a single soul in that crowd, realized I was the county land commissioner, the man who approves every single permit in this entire district. They had no idea the hellstorm they had just started. And as the sun beat down on my ranch's blocked driveway and the neighbors mocked me in full view, I finally turned away, but not before pulling out my phone to make one call. To the county records department. "Yeah, it's me," I said, my voice calm but ice cold. "I need you to send me everything you've got on the Willow Creek HOA, plans, approvals, permits, all of it. Because if they wanted war, they were going to get it. And the first bomb I was going to drop, their precious little fence, was on my land." Now let me take you back to how this whole mess started. 2 months earlier, my life was just how I liked it, peaceful and quiet. I had just retired from 20 years in county service. I loved the land, and I was proud of what I did. Most folks didn't even know I was still acting commissioner until the next election came around. My ranch, Red Creek Acres, had been in my family for generations. We raised cattle, had a few horses, and worked the land fair and square. It was 84 acres of hard-earned soil, right outside the Willow Creek subdivision, a newly built community full of fancy homes, shiny cars, and people who had never fixed a fence post in their life. I kept to myself. Most days I was up before the sun, feeding the animals, walking with Scout, my loyal German shepherd. My only neighbor who really spoke to me was an older guy named Carl, a veteran who moved to the area after his wife passed. He respected the land like I did, but everything changed the day they elected Linda Morrison as the HOA president. Linda was intense. She wore power suits to neighborhood meetings, the kind of woman who walked like she owned every square foot of grass she stepped on. And when she learned that my ranch was technically adjacent to Willow Creek, she decided it was time I joined the community. She came by one afternoon, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara. "Mr. Carson," she began with that fake, sweet voice, "we've been reviewing land use in the Willow Creek district. It seems your ranch technically shares our road access." I nodded slowly. "It's a county-maintained road." She kept smiling. "Right. But you see, our HOA has agreed that it's best for all residents if you join. We've already drawn up the welcome packet." I took the folder from her and flipped through. HOA fees, $900 a month. No livestock allowed, no visible fencing taller than 4 feet. And, get this, no external structures without HOA approval, including barns. I chuckled. "Ma'am, I've had barns on this land before your whole neighborhood had plumbing." She dropped the smile. "You'd do well to remember that this community has standards." "I have standards too," I replied. "They just come with dirt under the nails." I handed the packet back and walked away. That should have been the end of it. But Linda didn't like being told no. Over the next few weeks, I started getting strange letters. Fines for nuisance odors. Complaints about Unauthorized animal activity. At one point, they even claimed Scout was a danger to children, despite the fact that we live miles apart and he's never stepped paw into their subdivision. Then came the surveyors. I caught them on my property one morning, poking flags into the soil. When I asked who sent them, they mumbled something about boundary clarification for the HOA. That's when I knew it wasn't over. Carl warned me. That lady's got a personal vendetta, thinks everyone should bow to her HOA god. I laughed it off, but I kept one eye open. Something was off. Sure enough, last Friday, I returned from the county seat after reviewing plans for a new solar farm when I found the fence. 12 feet high, brand new steel blocking the main gate to my ranch. Linda and the board were there, standing around like they'd just solved world peace. And they were proud of it. They had no idea the land they had just fenced wasn't theirs. But I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. That night I sat on my porch with a cold drink and pulled out the county survey maps. I traced the lines again, just as I thought. The entrance and 30 feet beyond it were county easement. And more importantly, the space they built the fence on was recorded as my private agricultural buffer zone, meaning they built on my land. The next day, I filed an official complaint through the county system. Quietly. I didn't even sign it as the land commissioner. I wanted to see how far they'd go. Turns out far. Because the very next morning, Linda sent me a letter threatening legal action if I tried to break or tamper with the HOA's fence. And attached to the letter, a photo of her HOA board members posing in front of the fence, mocking me. Some of them even holding little "No Ranchers Allowed" signs like it was a joke. They thought they were untouchable. But I had just pulled their property records, and their HOA registration had expired last year. And as I sat there smiling, that's when my phone buzzed. It was Carl. "Jake, you need to come out front." "What's going on?" I asked. He hesitated. "They've started bringing in demolition equipment." I stood up so fast I nearly knocked my coffee over. "What do you mean, demolition?" "They're tearing down the access bridge, the one over the creek." My blood ran cold, because if they cut that bridge, they'd be cutting off my only direct path into the west pasture, where my pregnant mare was about to deliver. And that mare? She was worth over $60,000. I jumped into my truck and hit the gas, because now, it was personal. To everyone watching, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And tell me, what would you do if someone fenced off your property and laughed in your face? Should I go easy on them? Or should I teach them exactly what happens when you try to corner the wrong man? Especially when that man writes the land rules himself? I didn't even grab my hat. The tires of my truck screamed against the gravel as I made a hard turn toward the old access bridge. Scout barked from the passenger seat like he already knew something was wrong. Carl was waving both arms from the hilltop by the edge of his porch. "They brought in a backhoe," he shouted as I rolled down the window. Sure enough, just over the ridge, I spotted it, an enormous yellow machine growling beside the wooden bridge that connected my east gate to the west pasture. Two men in neon vests and hard hats were moving around like they had every right to be there. One of them held blueprints. Linda was also there, arms folded, sunglasses on again. She was standing beside a white SUV with Willow Creek HOA printed in big, ugly vinyl letters across the doors. A clipboard rested in her arms, and her mouth was moving fast, probably barking more orders. I pulled up so fast I nearly skidded onto the grass and hopped out before the truck even fully stopped. "Hey!" I shouted, striding up the hill. Linda turned her head like I was a fly buzzing in her ear. "Oh, it's you again," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard. "You mind explaining what the hell's going on here?" She gave me a look that said she was entertained. "We're removing unauthorized structures that pose a safety risk to our community. This bridge, according to our hired surveyors, overlaps with HOA-maintained land." I looked her dead in the eye. "That bridge is over 50 years old and sits on my private easement. You have no right." She shrugged. "Your opinion is noted, Mr. Carson. but we act in the interest of public safety." Then she turned to the backhoe operator and gave a thumbs up. He fired up the machine. I stepped forward, fury boiling through my chest. "If you move 1 inch closer to that bridge, I swear—" "You'll do what?" she interrupted. "Call your cowboy club?" I stared at her, heart pounding. My mare, June, was heavily pregnant and needed access to the vet station in the west pasture. If that bridge went down, I'd have to trailer her 3 miles across bumpy terrain. "You are trespassing," I growled, "and I'm warning you." She rolled her eyes. "Then do something about it." So I did. I pulled my wallet out and flipped it open, revealing my county land commissioner ID. The golden seal gleamed in the morning sun. Linda's smile twitched, but she still didn't get it. "This is a joke, right?" She laughed, looking at the badge. "You think waving that around scares me?" I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and snapped a photo of the bridge, the equipment, and Linda herself with the timestamp and coordinates enabled. Then I dialed a number. "County Sheriff's Office," came the voice on the line. "Commissioner Carson," I said, "we've got an active illegal demolition in progress on private property. I need a unit sent to Red Creek Acres immediately. Trespassing, vandalism, and potential endangerment of livestock." The backhoe shut down. The operator, sensing something wasn't right, stepped out and whispered something to his partner. The second man's face turned pale. He started packing up. Linda stormed up to me. "You're bluffing." I didn't even look at her. "ETA?" I asked into the phone. "4 minutes," the dispatcher replied. When I looked back up, the operators were already jogging to their pickup. Linda tried to stop them. "Where are you going? You're under contract. Get back on that." "Nope," one of them yelled back. "We ain't messing with the county." Linda spun toward me, face red like a kettle boiling over. "You think you're untouchable?" I stepped closer, low and calm. "No, I know the law. And I wrote the approval for this bridge myself, which means it's registered, documented, and protected by state agricultural access codes." She took a step back. And then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not a normal laugh. A cold, calculating laugh. "Oh, you want to play games, cowboy?" she said. "Fine. You think a badge is going to save you? This isn't over." She got back into her SUV, tires spitting up gravel as she peeled off. Carl walked up beside me. "Think she finally got the message?" I shook my head. "No. I think she just realized who she's up against, and now she's going to get desperate." And I was right, because 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the HOA, from the County Code Enforcement Division. It said my barn, my livestock shelter, and my fencing all required immediate inspection for potential violations, based on an anonymous community tip. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it up slowly and looked out toward the ridge. She was trying to use my own system against me. And the worst part? She wasn't finished. Because that same evening, as I sat eating dinner, Scout started barking wildly at the front porch. I stepped outside and found something shocking tied to my gate. A printed sign, big bold red letters. "Trespassers will be shot. Hoe zone. Ranchers out." I scanned the yard for cameras. She was sending a message, and she was about to learn how dangerous that could be. Because now I was done playing defense. To everyone watching this, tell me where you're watching from. And have you ever had to deal with someone abusing power? What would you do if someone tried to bulldoze your life with a smile? Because in the next moment, I filed a county-wide injunction. And then I did something even better. I launched a surprise audit of every HOA permit filed in the last 3 years. And what I found? Could tear Willow Creek down to its fake brick foundation. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my porch in the dark, a single lamp glowing behind me, Scout lying at my feet. The sign they tied to my gate, "Trespassers will be shot. Chozone, ranchers out," was still swaying in the wind. I hadn't taken it down yet. I wanted to keep it as evidence and motivation, because this wasn't just petty anymore. This was war. The next morning, I walked into the county office building, nodded at the security guard who knew me by name, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. The place smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. I greeted a few old colleagues, people I trained during my years in the department, and stepped into the records room. I didn't need anyone's permission. I still had access codes. Sitting at the terminal, I began pulling up every permit application submitted by the Willow Creek HOA over the last 3 years. Every construction notice, every road maintenance request, every tree removal, lighting structure, utility line adjustment. And I quickly noticed a pattern. A bad one. At least 40% of the files were incomplete. Some were missing approval stamps. Others used outdated zoning maps. A few had no public notice documentation attached at all. One application in particular stood out. Their main clubhouse expansion, a project Linda had bragged about in the local newspaper. The problem: it sat partially outside of the legally zoned HOA perimeter. That meant they had built a structure on county-owned conservation land. I smiled. This wasn't just a technicality, this was a serious violation. A felony in some cases, but I wasn't going to pounce yet. Not like she did. No, I was going to let it simmer. Let her believe she was still in control. Because timing matters. And speaking of timing, I got a message from Carl around noon. HOA reps parked outside your barn again. 3 of them. 1 taking pictures, 1 writing something down. I hopped into my truck and raced back. Sure enough, when I arrived, 3 people were standing by the east barn. Linda wasn't among them, but I recognized the short one in a tight polo shirt. His name was Mitch, another board member with a Napoleon complex and a temper like a toaster set too high. "What are you doing?" I asked, stepping out of the truck calmly but firmly. The woman with him jumped a little, but Mitch just puffed out his chest. "Official HOA inspection," he declared, tapping a fake-looking badge on his belt. "We've had multiple reports of structural violations, rusted panels, unsanitary water runoff, pest hazards." I raised an eyebrow. "This is private agricultural land, not subject to HOA regulation." He grinned. "Ah, but your driveway connects to our internal road system. That gives us jurisdiction." I almost laughed. "The road is county property. I approved the asphalt overlay myself." His fake badge gleamed under the sun. He leaned closer. "You don't scare us, cowboy. You think because you've got some big title you can ignore the rules?" "I don't ignore rules," I said. "I enforce them." He rolled his eyes, scribbled something on a clipboard, and walked back to his vehicle. But I watched closely. He didn't throw the paper away. He nailed it to my barn door. I waited until they drove off, then pulled it down. Citation: Notice of fine, $12,000 for unauthorized structure maintenance. They were pretending to be the law now. This wasn't just rude anymore. This was impersonation. Fraud. That night, I called the sheriff again and filed a second report. This time, I sent photos of Mitch's fake badge and the citation form. "We've been getting more of these reports lately," the deputy told me. "Other ranchers, HOA overreach, but this one's the worst I've seen." I nodded. "And it's about to unravel. Fast." The next day, I made my move. I mailed an official notice of violation to the Willow Creek HOA under my commissioner seal, listing illegal structure on conservation land, unauthorized fencing on private buffer zone, impersonation of county officers, obstruction of agricultural access, non-renewal of HOA zoning registration, and I gave them 72 hours to respond. I didn't expect them to go quietly, but I also didn't expect what happened next. That afternoon, Carl knocked on my door looking shaken. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "You need to come out front, now." I followed him down the driveway. There were 3 pickup trucks parked on the ridge across from my property. Men were standing around, 5 of them, wearing matching black jackets that said HOA Enforcement Patrol. It looked like some kind of wannabe security squad. One of them pulled a bullhorn from the truck bed and shouted across my land, This property is in violation of community code. Vacate all illegal livestock and prepare for asset seizure. I froze. They're bluffing, Carl said quietly. I nodded. But now they're threatening force. That's not bluffing, that's criminal. I stepped forward, recording everything with my phone. You are trespassing and issuing false legal threats on private land, I shouted back. Disperse immediately or law enforcement will be called. They didn't move. That's when Scout growled low beside me, his hackles raised. He'd never done that before, not even when we had coyotes lurking. I dialed the sheriff's office for the third time that week. Sheriff's unit is already en route, the dispatcher said. You're not the only complaint today. One of their guys tried to barge into another ranch 3 miles up, claimed he was there to inspect fences. I stayed calm, but my heart was hammering. The trucks pulled away before the sheriff arrived, but I got it all on video, every face, every word, and I already had legal cause. But then something worse happened. That night, around 2 a.m., I heard Scout barking again, wild this time. Panicked, I grabbed my flashlight and rushed out. The barn door was swinging open. Someone had broken the lock. Inside, my livestock were spooked. My mare, June, was bucking in her stall, foaming at the mouth. The cows were mooing loud enough to wake the hills. There were tire tracks right by the side gate. Fresh. Someone had tried to break in. They had crossed a line I never thought they would. And now it wasn't just about land. It was about lives. Because if they had spooked June enough to hurt herself, or lost her before the foal came, they'd have ruined a bloodline that took years to build. I walked outside and stared into the night. My hands were shaking. I wasn't going to wait for the county anymore. The next morning, I made one more phone call. Not to the sheriff, not to the board, to a reporter. Because it was time the whole town knew who the Willow Creek HOA really was. The next morning I met the reporter in the parking lot behind the county courthouse. His name was Travis Riley, a young, hungry journalist from the local paper, the Rockland Daily Post. He'd been covering neighborhood corruption for months, but no one had given him anything solid. Until now. He pulled up in a dusty Honda Civic, camera bag slung over one shoulder, notepad in the other. Mr. Carson? He asked, breathless. I extended a hand. Call me Jake. He shook it hard, eyes wide. I've heard rumors about HOA overreach, but this is next level. You haven't seen the half of it, I replied, handing him a thick manila envelope. Inside were copies of the falsified citations, photos of their fake enforcement patrol, video of their verbal threats, aerial maps showing the illegal fence and clubhouse structure, the expired HOA registration certificate, and a copy of the trespass report and barn break-in file from the sheriff's office. Travis flipped through the papers like they were gold. They actually formed a fake patrol, he said. With jackets? They used a bullhorn, I said. Tried to declare my ranch as seized. Travis whistled low. And you're the current county land commissioner? For a few more months, until the election. But I still have jurisdiction, and records access. He nodded, already scribbling furiously. Okay. This is going to get ugly. I looked him square in the eye. Good. I want ugly. I want the truth out there. That same afternoon, Travis dropped a bombshell story titled, HOA Tyranny, Rancher Battles Illegal Takeover from Rogue Neighborhood Board. It featured images of the fake patrol jackets, the demolished barn gate, the barbed wire fence, and a still from the video where Mitch shouted into the bullhorn like some comic book villain. It went viral locally. Fast. Within hours, my phone lit up with calls. From local farmers, residents, even 2 city council members who were stunned at how far the HOA had gone. Linda? She went silent. For about 24 hours. Then, she struck back. The very next morning I woke up to find a condemned notice taped to my front porch, stamped with the HOA logo. A big red X across the paper. Scout barked and tugged it off with his teeth, growling like he wanted to chew the paper and whoever delivered it. The note claimed my house was no longer safe for habitation, due to unsanitary conditions and fire hazards. And it was signed falsely by someone calling themselves an HOA health safety officer. I couldn't believe it. She was now faking health code violations. This wasn't just power-hungry anymore. This was criminal impersonation and harassment. I called the sheriff again. "Sheriff's already building a case," the deputy told me. "We've got 4 open reports connected to your HOA now. They're in deep." I hung up and smiled. Because that same morning something incredible happened. A knock came at my door. It was Carl, holding a fresh copy of the Rockland Daily Post. But it wasn't just the headline. It was what was underneath it. The county had launched a full-blown investigation into Willow Creek HOA. And the kicker? They were suspending all of the HOA's permit applications, financial accounts, and enforcement actions pending a full audit. Carl grinned. "Looks like they kicked the wrong cowboy." But even with the pressure building, Linda didn't stop. She doubled down. Later that day, a caravan of HOA board members showed up at the fence. They wore bright orange vests now and held clipboards. A small crowd of Willow Creek residents gathered behind them, some filming, others watching nervously. I stepped outside just in time to hear Linda announce loudly, "Due to county failure to respond to repeated requests, the HOA will now be asserting full jurisdiction over Red Creek Acres to preserve neighborhood harmony." A few people clapped, barely. Others looked confused. I crossed my arms. "You're trespassing again." Linda turned toward me with that same smirk. "No, you are. And we've filed our own petition with the HOA's parent association to absorb your parcel under emergency community regulations." That's when I laughed. Out loud. "You filed a petition with a private organization to override county law?" She stepped closer. "You can laugh now, but you'll regret it when you see what happens next." And she turned to the crowd and shouted, "Tear it down!" That's when Mitch stepped forward with wire cutters. He walked up to my barbed wire fence and clipped one strand clean through. Then he moved to the next. And the next. The crowd gasped. I didn't move. I just pulled out my phone and recorded every second. Because now, they were tampering with protected agricultural fencing. A state offense. The sheriff's truck pulled up exactly 7 minutes later. The deputy stepped out, took one look at the clipped wires, and radioed in backup. Within 15 minutes, 3 squad cars lined the ridge. Mitch was arrested on the spot. Linda started shouting at the deputies, throwing her hands up, demanding they recognize her authority as an HOA president. But this time the law wasn't listening. Because now, even they were done with her. She was cited for harassment, trespassing, falsifying legal documents, and impersonating a government officer. But this wasn't the end. As she was being escorted to the squad car, she turned back to me and shouted, "You think this is over? I still have people. You won't win." And I shouted back calmly, "I already did." But the real twist was waiting in my mailbox the next day. An envelope, no return address. Inside, a printed document, a deed transfer, an attempted transfer of my land, with a forged signature, filed quietly through a shady real estate agent listed under Willow Creek Investments. And that's when I realized Linda had been planning to steal my ranch outright, to sell it. They weren't just trying to harass me, they were trying to erase me. And they almost got away with it. I held the forged deed transfer in my hand, my fingers trembling. The signature they used was almost mine, a near-perfect copy. Same swoop in the J, same tight curve on the C. But I knew my own handwriting like the land beneath my boots. And this was an imposter's attempt to bury me alive under fake paperwork. They had filed to transfer ownership of Red Creek Acres to a shell company, run by the HOA's real estate consultant. It wasn't harassment anymore. This was attempted land theft. I took a deep breath. Scout nudged my leg, sensing my fury. "Not today, boy," I muttered. I scanned the form. It had a notarization stamp, fake, of course, and an address from a P.O. box 3 towns over. The agent listed was one I'd never seen before. But after a quick search on the county's system, I saw that name had popped up in 3 other suspicious land transfers, 2 of which were also tied to disputes involving Willow Creek HOA. I drove straight to the recorder's office. Nancy, the clerk there, had worked with me for over a decade. When I dropped the form on her desk, she leaned in close. "This came in 2 days ago," she said after checking the log. "It hadn't been processed yet, thank God." I looked her in the eye. "I need an emergency freeze on my land file. No changes allowed unless I sign it in person, under oath." She nodded. "Already done, Jake. I'm also flagging this for the DA's office." That was good, but I wasn't finished. I went back to the county building and called in every favor I'd ever banked: zoning officers, code enforcers, water rights analysts, the Agricultural Commission. By 4 p.m., I had signatures from 5 different departments for a joint task force review of Willow Creek HOA's operations. And the next morning, we posted notices, official county signs, investigation pending, no structure alterations permitted, do not remove under penalty of law. I personally walked down the paved roads of Willow Creek, tacking one notice after another to lamp posts, stop signs, their clubhouse gate, even the front entrance. By noon, the HOA group chat had exploded. How did I know? Because Carl had been added to it months ago after attending one meeting. He never left, just muted it. But now he was screenshotting the whole meltdown. Linda wasn't in custody anymore. She'd been released with a court date. But she was furious. She was threatening lawsuits, calling emergency HOA board meetings, accusing me of corruption. But no one was listening anymore. Because her secrets? They were tumbling out like a busted dam. Travis, the reporter, published a follow-up article. Land theft and forgery, the HOA scheme that nearly stole a county ranch. And the story wasn't just local anymore. Regional outlets picked it up. State investigators took notice. The HOA's real estate consultant was arrested that same evening outside his office. The charges? Attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit land theft. Turns out he'd been quietly helping Linda identify properties on the edge of their community, properties she believed she could pressure or fake her way into owning. They had already tried with 2 other owners, one of whom had moved out of state after threats and unexplainable code violations. Linda didn't want to be HOA president. She wanted to be a land baron. But now her empire was caving in. But before I could breathe easy, something else happened. 3 nights later at 3:17 a.m., Scout started barking again, this time louder, angrier. I grabbed my shotgun and flashlight and rushed outside. The smell of smoke hit me instantly. I raced around the side of the barn and saw it. Flames licking the grass near the far side of the stable. Someone had thrown a Molotov cocktail into my haystack. If the fire had reached the stables, I could have lost everything. Livestock, supplies, even the entire barn. But by some miracle, I had just installed sprinklers in the barn area a few months back. The system kicked on automatically and doused the fire before it spread. I stamped out the last of the flames, breathing hard. Scout whimpered beside me. He'd tried his best to alert me in time, and thank God he had. The sheriff's department arrived within 20 minutes. This wasn't just trespassing now. It was arson, and there was no doubt in my mind who was behind it. The bottle had fingerprints, a partial glove print too. I handed it over. "This is her last move," I told the deputy. "She knows she's done. She's just trying to burn it all down." And I was right. The next morning, Linda vanished, didn't show up at her house, didn't attend her scheduled HOA meeting, didn't respond to messages. She'd packed up and disappeared. But the law was catching up. Within 48 hours, she was tracked down in a motel 2 counties away, trying to book a flight under her sister's name. They brought her back in cuffs. This time, the list of charges was long: trespassing, harassment, forgery, attempted land theft, impersonation of a government official, fraudulent citations, destruction of protected agricultural property, and attempted arson. But I didn't celebrate, because I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this to protect the land, to defend what generations before me had built with sweat, with family, with honor. Later that evening, Carl sat beside me on the porch again, 2 cold drinks between us. "Looks like she finally ran out of schemes," he said, shaking his head. I nodded. "She thought she could write her own laws." Carl chuckled. "Didn't know the man she messed with writes the land codes himself." We watched the sunset for a while, quiet, until my phone buzzed. A call from a local congressman. Apparently they wanted to interview me for a rural land protection advisory role. Carl grinned. "Guess some good came out of all this after all." But just as I was about to answer the call, a black SUV rolled slowly past my front gate. Windows tinted, no plates. It didn't stop, didn't honk, just kept rolling down the hill, quiet as a shadow. I stood up, suddenly alert, because even though Linda was gone, it seemed like someone else was watching now. And maybe the HOA wasn't the only threat hiding behind property lines. That black SUV didn't return that night, but something about it gnawed at my gut. I hadn't told anyone about the forged deed transfer, except the county, the sheriff, and Travis the reporter. That meant someone else had either been watching the land, or Linda had partners she hadn't named yet. I installed 2 new trail cameras, one by the front gate and another near the pasture, facing the road. I wasn't taking any chances. Over the next 2 days, peace seemed to return. The newspaper ran a full editorial praising the county for holding the HOA accountable. Linda's face was plastered all over the front page, now labeled as the ringleader of a suburban land scam. The state even announced an initiative to regulate HOA power more strictly. Some folks called me a hero, but I didn't care about that. I cared about protecting the land and the animals on it. On the 3rd day, just after dawn, I checked the trail cam footage, and my stomach dropped. The same black SUV had passed by again, twice, once at 11:43 p.m., and again at 3:08 a.m. The vehicle paused at the entrance gate both times. The second time, the driver's side window rolled down for a few seconds, and then it pulled away. I zoomed in, frame by frame. The driver? I couldn't see their face clearly, but I saw the tattoo on the forearm resting on the window edge. A small green snake coiled around a key. I knew that symbol. It wasn't Linda's. It belonged to a man named Roger Knox. He was the HOA's original developer, the guy who built the Willow Creek subdivision 10 years ago, then vanished after being sued for zoning violations in another state. Rumor had it he lost his developer's license but never really stopped operating. Now he was back? Why? I called Travis, who was now neck-deep in research. He called me back an hour later, voice tense. "Jake, I dug into Roger Knox. You were right. He's got ties to multiple shell companies, including the one listed on your forged deed transfer." "So he was part of it?" I asked. "Worse, I think he was the mastermind. Linda was just the face." I froze. So Linda was the distraction, and Roger was the real threat. "Exactly," Travis said. "And if that SUV belongs to him, he's scouting, planning, he's not done yet." I hung up and paced the porch, rage mixing with disbelief. They'd already tried to steal my land. They'd burned my hay, threatened my animals, mocked my family's legacy. And now the ghost behind it all was circling back like a vulture. Carl stopped by mid-afternoon and saw the tension in my face. "You all right?" he asked. I showed him the footage. His jaw clenched. "Knox," he muttered. "That devil's name still floats around in veterans groups. Tried to take old farmland near Meadow Glen, too. They shut him down hard." I turned to Carl. "I'm not just going to shut him down, I'm going to expose him." That night, I wrote a full report with all the links. Shell company records, property transfer attempts, camera footage, Travis's newspaper files, old zoning violations tied to Roger Knox. I sent it directly to the state attorney general's office. But I didn't stop there. I also contacted AgNet, the Agricultural Land Ethics Network, a watchdog group that publicly blacklists land developers who violate rural zoning codes. 2 days later, they added Roger Knox to their national fraud watch list. His face, along with the snake and key tattoo, was now on full display. And that's when the threats started. Unmarked envelopes. One mailed to Carl's mailbox with nothing inside but a dead snake. Another left at my ranch gate with a single typed message. "You should have taken the deal." I handed everything to the sheriff. They boosted patrols around Red Creek Acres, even offered to install a panic button in my house. But I told them no. I wasn't scared. I was angry. And more than anything, I was ready. Because just as Knox thought he could scare me into silence, something unexpected happened. A full-scale class-action lawsuit was filed against Willow Creek HOA and all related shell companies by the homeowners themselves. Over 60 families signed on. Turns out they'd also been harassed, manipulated, and misled. And once Travis published the story of Roger Knox's reappearance, people stopped being afraid. They stood up. Residents started coming forward with emails, recordings, receipts. Even a former HOA treasurer named Angela agreed to testify. She revealed that Knox had been quietly funneling HOA funds into consulting services billed to his shell companies. Over $270,000 vanished in less than 2 years. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every homeowner, every rancher, every family that had been lied to, bullied, or robbed. And in the final twist of Chapter 6, as I walked to my mailbox late one evening, I found a thick letter waiting for me. A new official land survey report. It confirmed that Willow Creek's entire north fence line, including the original 12-foot steel monster they built to block my entrance, was not only on my land, it extended 20 feet past the boundary line into protected environmental reserve land, which meant Roger Knox had committed a federal zoning violation, and that was the final nail. Because now, the FBI was stepping in. The next morning, 2 black government SUVs rolled through my ranch gate. But this time, they weren't here to threaten me. They were from the FBI's Environmental and Real Estate Fraud Task Force, and they meant business. Agent Lisa Merrick, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a clipboard and a badge clipped to her belt, walked up to me and shook my hand. "Mr. Carson," she said firmly, "we've reviewed your complaint, the documentation, the satellite imagery, and the recorded statements. There's enough here to launch a federal probe into Willow Creek HOA and its affiliated companies." I nodded slowly. It's about time someone dug deeper. Behind her, another agent was already scanning the barbed wire fence with a GPS tracker and taking measurements. Another was photographing the clubhouse with a long-lens camera. Within an hour, they'd placed federal seizure notices on the following: the 12-foot fence they illegally built across my ranch entrance, the HOA clubhouse, partially constructed on protected reserve land, the real estate office tied to Roger Knox's shell company, several luxury vehicles bought with HOA consulting funds. That afternoon, Roger Knox was arrested. They caught him at a private airfield outside San Antonio, trying to board a chartered plane with 2 fake passports, 3 burner phones, and over $80,000 in cash. Turns out, the forged deed on my ranch wasn't the only one. He'd used a similar scam on 5 other properties across the state. And this time, there would be no backroom deals, no fake permits, no vanishing into the night. He was charged with multiple counts of real estate fraud, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, violation of federal environmental land protections, obstruction of justice. Linda Morrison, his so-called HOA president, was rearrested as a co-conspirator. Her bail was revoked. She was officially labeled a flight risk after the forged deed linked her directly to Knox's plan. It made state headlines within 48 hours. The front page of the Rockland Daily Post read, "The Ranch That Fought Back, How One Man Stood Up Against HOA Tyranny and Won." They even used a picture of me standing beside the newly reinstalled Red Creek Acres sign, my mare, June, nuzzling her foal in the background. People stopped me at the feed store. Veterans saluted me at the farmer's market. Even the mayor paid a visit to thank me personally. But I stayed humble. This wasn't about fame. It was about the land. about principles, about what happens when people forget that respect doesn't come from paperwork and fake power. It comes from how you treat others. And the best part? The entire Willow Creek HOA was dissolved. The county took over temporary management, and with the homeowners' overwhelming vote, they abolished the HOA model entirely and created a resident board that operated on community trust, not fear and fake fines. Angela, the former treasurer, was elected as head of the board. Carl, my neighbor, was asked to serve as the community liaison. He laughed for 5 straight minutes when they asked him, then said, "Only if Jake gets a vote too." I declined. "Y'all got it from here," I said. "I'm going back to ranching." But there was one final cherry on top. A few weeks later, I received a letter, official, embossed, from the governor's office. They wanted to recognize me with the Rural Land Stewardship Award for outstanding defense of agricultural property rights and unwavering commitment to justice. Scout barked when I opened the envelope. I smiled. "You gonna wear a tie, boy?" he growled. "Didn't think so." Now, when I ride out to the edge of Red Creek Acres, the land feels lighter. The fence is gone. The gate is mine again. The skies feel clearer, like the dust of chaos has finally settled. Sometimes I find Scout lying under the oak tree near the old boundary line, watching the road, waiting. I still check the cameras, still keep a sidearm on the dashboard. Not out of fear, out of wisdom, because as long as there's land to be stolen, there'll be people like Knox trying to steal it. But they won't take this ranch. Not on my watch. So if you're out there, watching this, maybe you're just another homeowner, or a rancher like me, or someone being pushed around by an HOA that's gone too far, just remember, you have rights, you have a voice, and no one can take what's yours if you know who you are. Stand your ground. And if they mock you, just smile, because they never see the storm coming when you're the one holding the thunder.